When Princess Anne rose to her feet during the closed-door gathering at Windsor Castle, a hush fell over the room so profound it seemed to steal the very breath from those present. The dim light filtering through ancient windows touched faces, lined with fear and uncertainty. This was no ordinary meeting. It was summoned under dire circumstances. King Charles's declining health had forced the royal family into a corner, demanding decisions that none of them were truly ready to face. Every heart in the room pounded with questions too terrifying to voice. What Anne carried, they knew, could change the future of the monarchy forever. Prince William sat rigid, his hands clenched tightly together, the weight of the moment bearing down on him with crushing force. He had spent his entire life preparing for a day like this, yet nothing could prepare him for the storm about to break. Princess Anne, always composed, always steady, betrayed a rare crack in her armor. She cleared her throat, hesitated for a fraction of a second that felt like an eternity, and then spoke words that would send shivers through the royal bloodline. Without embellishment, without ceremony, Anne revealed that King Charles had entrusted her with a personal request, a final wish born out of private conversations, far from the eyes of the press or even most of the family. A wish he could not voice himself anymore, not with the strength and certainty that once defined him. A wish that would not merely affect titles and crowns, but would strike at the very soul of what it meant to be royal. A ripple of unease passed through the room, a shared instinct that the ground beneath their feet was about to shift forever. William's breath caught in his throat. He knew instinctively that this was bigger than succession, bigger than tradition. Anne's voice, though calm, carried the unmistakable tremor of emotion. She spoke of King Charles's desire for the monarchy to survive not through force, not through ceremony, but through something far rarer, authentic leadership. And the king had seen where that rare hope lived. It wasn't in the ancient bloodlines. It wasn't even in him. It was in Catherine, the very woman who had walked into their world quietly, without entitlement, but with a strength and grace no crown could teach. As Anne carefully unfolded the king's private words, William's eyes burned with tears he could no longer blink away. His chest tightened as he realized that everything, the years of silent preparation, the crushing scrutiny, the sacrifices, had all led to this fragile, breathtaking moment. Catherine was not simply a queen in waiting. She was the monarchy's last true chance at survival. And it would fall to William to stand by her, not just as a husband, but as a future king willing to reshape history alongside her. The room remained frozen, held captive by the gravity of Anne's revelation. Each heartbeat was a drumbeat toward a future that none of them could predict. Yet even as the pain of that moment filled the air, an even deeper truth was poised to emerge. Because hidden within the king's wish was a message not from Charles alone, but from a queen whose wisdom still whispered through the very walls of Windsor. But it was only the beginning. The real shock would come as Anne revealed the late queen's hidden message. The room remained locked in silence, but Princess Anne's next words carried a different weight, heavier, more intimate, and far more devastating. She spoke not only of King Charles's wish, but of a deeper secret tucked away in the final conversations he had shared with their late mother. Queen Elizabeth II, a woman known for her iron discipline and unshakable sense of duty, had, in her final private moments, let the mask slip just enough to reveal a glimpse of her true hopes for the crown's future. And those hopes had not rested with tradition, nor with bloodline alone. They had rested with something infinitely more fragile character. Anne recounted the moment with a steady voice, though every syllable seemed to pull harder at the fraying emotions around her. Alone in Windsor, in one of their last mother-daughter conversations, Elizabeth had confided her growing concerns about the survival of the monarchy. She had seen storms brewing on every side: scandals, public disillusionment, a relentless media machine that tore through reputation like paper. She had known the future would not be kind to royalty simply because of heritage. It would demand something rare, something deeper. And she had seen it shining most brightly, not in the seasoned veterans of the family, but in a woman who had married into their world with no shield of bloodline to protect her. Catherine. The Queen had not spoken these thoughts openly, fearing they might stir unrest or jealousy among the family's more traditional ranks. Instead, she had chosen Anne, the one royal who understood duty better than praise, to carry the knowledge silently until the moment was right. That moment had come. And now, as Anne spoke, it was not just a revelation, but a passing of a burden. Queen Elizabeth had seen in Catherine not just grace, not just warmth, but an unyielding backbone, a quiet resilience that could carry a broken institution back to its feet if the worst ever came to pass. Prince William's heart broke anew as he listened. His grandmother's voice, so familiar in his memories, seemed to echo through Anne's recounting. He realized then that Catherine had been more than just his partner. Through ceremony and spectacle. She had been chosen, seen, trusted. She had been the Queen's secret hope for a new kind of monarchy, one anchored not by grand declarations, but by quiet, relentless service. The words cut deeper than any coronation oath could have. They did not merely validate Catherine's sacrifices. They demanded more. They demanded everything. William's tears, once brimming just from grief, now flowed from the overwhelming weight of what lay ahead. He wasn't simply inheriting a crown. He was inheriting a fragile legacy, one that could only survive if Catherine stood at its center. Yadrides. Gravity of the Queen's secret vision settled heavily on everyone present. There could be no turning back, no safer alternative. If the monarchy were to endure the storms of a changing world, it would not be because of its history, but because of the rare, steady hands willing to steer it through unseen tempests. And, as Anne's voice trembled with emotion, William realized this wish would reshape everything they had known. Catherine Middleton had never been destined for a throne. No royal blood coursed through her veins, no ancient lineage paved her way into history. She had stepped into the royal spotlight quietly, almost humbly, with no expectation of being anything more than a loyal partner by William's side. Yet, as the tides of time battered the monarchy, and as chaos roiled behind the palace walls, it became clear that the greatest strength of the royal family would not be found in crowns or ceremonies. It would be found in her. Catherine, steady, resilient, and unshaken, emerged as the monarchy's most powerful secret weapon. While others within the family faltered under public scrutiny or crumbled beneath personal scandals, Catherine remained unwavering. She walked a fine line, balancing the suffocating weight of tradition with the desperate need for a monarchy that felt human, accessible, and real. She understood something that centuries of kings and queens before her had often forgotten: that the throne's survival was not tied to its grandeur, but to its ability to inspire devotion. In every smile, in every soft-spoken word, in every dignified appearance, she redefined what it meant to be royal in a modern world that no longer bowed easily to titles alone. Catherine's relatability was not an accident, it was a choice. She never allowed the grandeur of her role to create a wall between herself and the people she served. Whether attending lavish state functions or quietly visiting children's hospitals far from the flashing cameras, she carried herself with the same genuine warmth. She did not wear her title as armor. She wore it as a responsibility to serve with humility, to connect with the public without artifice. And as crises rocked the royal household one after another, Catherine stood calm at the center of the storm, her serene demeanor a silent rebuke to the chaos around her. It was this unshakable core that Queen Elizabeth had seen, long before the public fully grasped it. Beneath Catherine's polished exterior lived a fierce resilience, a quiet, relentless commitment that no headline scandal, no internal betrayal, no shifting tide of public opinion could erode. She became the royal family's anchor when tempers flared, when alliances fractured, when the weight of expectation grew unbearable. And yet, she bore it all without spectacle, without complaint, with a grace so rare it startled even those who had once doubted her. But this remarkable rise came with a heavy and invisible burden. For as much as the world now admired her, it demanded even more. Catherine had not simply married into a life of privilege. She had married into a battlefield where every misstep could be fatal to the crown she was destined to protect. And while she carried the weight of public adoration, she also shouldered the silent, crushing expectations of a nation desperate for stability. Her strength had become their last hope, and in the shadows of Windsor, among the whispered wishes of a dying king and a departed queen, it was clear Catherine's true battle was only beginning. Yet even as the spotlight shifted to Catherine, another parallel quietly emerged, one no one had expected. In a family where alliances are fleeting and loyalties are often tested by the glare of the world's attention, Princess Anne and Catherine Middleton found something extraordinary. Not in grand gestures or declarations, but in quiet understanding. In the unspoken bond forged not by blood, but by duty. Across generations, through decades of shifting expectations, they stood as rare examples of what it truly meant to serve. And as the monarchy's future hung precariously in the balance, it became clear that their connection was far more powerful than most had ever realized. Princess Anne had spent her life defying expectations, choosing relentless service over the glittering distractions that often consumed those born into royalty. She had carved out a path built on hard work, not headlines. There were no scandals clinging to her name, no desperate bids for public affection. Only the steady, unwavering march of duty, one engagement, one charity, one quiet moment of service after another. It was a life that demanded sacrifice without applause, and Anne had given it willingly, year after year. In Catherine, she saw a mirror of that same devotion beginning to take shape. Anne understood, better than anyone, the crushing weight Catherine now carried. The unbearable expectation to be perfect, to never falter, to smile under the weight of 1,000 invisible burdens. She had seen it destroy others. She had watched as royal titles became cages and public admiration turned into public trial. But Catherine, much like Anne herself, chose a different path. She embraced the invisible labor, the exhausting devotion to a role that would never fully reward her, because she believed in something bigger than herself. She believed, as Anne did, in service. Their bond didn't need words. It was visible in the moments caught fleetingly by a watchful public side glances exchanged during ceremonies, small nods of approval, the effortless way they moved in step during joint engagements. These glimpses hinted at a deep current of mutual respect, a quiet collaboration that spoke louder than any formal alliance ever could. Anne, once the misunderstood outsider of her generation, now found an unlikely kindred spirit in the woman once labeled commoner by the tabloids. Together, they represented a bridge between the past and a future not yet secured. It was no accident that Anne was the one to reveal Queen Elizabeth's secret hopes. It was not merely a duty passed down, it was a torch handed from one woman who had carried the weight of tradition without complaint to another who would now be asked to do the same, under even harsher scrutiny. Anne's decision was deliberate, and the message was clear. The survival of the monarchy would not rest on ancient crowns or inherited thrones, but on the rare few willing to bear the invisible wounds of leadership without ever showing them. But it wasn't just a simple tribute. Anne's announcement carried a veiled warning about the royal family's survival. In a family where alliances are fleeting and loyalties are often tested by the glare of the world's attention, Princess Anne and Catherine Middleton found something extraordinary. Not in grand gestures or declarations, but in quiet understanding. In the unspoken bond forged not by blood, but by duty. Across generations, through decades of shifting expectations, they stood as rare examples of what it truly meant to serve. And as the monarchy's future hung precariously in the balance, it became clear that their connection was far more powerful than most had ever realized. Princess Anne had spent her life defying expectations, choosing relentless service over the glittering distractions that often consumed those born into royalty. She had carved out a path built on hard work, not headlines. There were no scandals clinging to her name, no desperate bids for public affection. Only the steady, unwavering march of duty, one engagement, one charity, one quiet moment of service after another. It was a life that demanded sacrifice without applause, and Anne had given it willingly, year after year. In Catherine, she saw a mirror of that same devotion beginning to take shape. Anne understood, better than anyone, the crushing weight Catherine now carried, the unbearable expectation to be perfect, to never falter, to smile under the weight of 1,000 invisible burdens. She had seen it destroy others. She had watched as royal titles became cages and public admiration turned into public trial. But Catherine, much like Anne herself, chose a different path. She embraced the invisible labor, the exhausting devotion to a role that would never fully reward her, because she believed in something bigger than herself. She believed, as Anne did, in service. Their bond didn't need words. It was visible in the moments caught fleetingly by a watchful public side glances exchanged during ceremonies, small nods of approval, the effortless way they moved in step during joint engagements. These glimpses hinted at a deep current of mutual respect, a quiet collaboration that spoke louder than any formal alliance ever could. Anne, once the misunderstood outsider of her generation, now found an unlikely kindred spirit in the woman once labeled commoner by the tabloids. Together, they represented a bridge between the past and a future not yet secured. It was no accident that Anne was the one to reveal Queen Elizabeth's secret hopes. It was not merely a duty passed down, it was a torch handed from one woman who had carried the weight of tradition without complaint to another who would now be asked to do the same, under even harsher scrutiny. Anne's decision was deliberate, and the message was clear. The survival of the monarchy would not rest on ancient crowns or inherited thrones, but on the rare few willing to bear the invisible wounds of leadership without ever showing them. But it wasn't just a simple tribute. Anne's announcement carried a veiled warning about the royal family's survival. Behind the gilded doors of the palace, far from the cheering crowds and the cameras that demanded endless performances of strength, King Charles faced a fear he could not voice aloud. It was not fear for himself. He had long made peace with the fragility of his own life. It was fear for the institution he had spent a lifetime preparing to inherit and protect. The monarchy, ancient yet increasingly fragile, teetered on a precipice he could no longer deny. In the private spaces where power and vulnerability collided, Charles wrestled with a truth that gnawed at him. The world was changing faster than tradition could follow, and unless something extraordinary intervened, the crown itself might crumble. His health struggles, once minor whispers behind palace walls, had begun to grow louder. Every doctor's visit, every private consultation, every sleepless night carried the same bitter undertone. Time was no longer his ally. What once felt like a distant obligation to prepare the future now became an urgent, almost desperate mission. Charles understood better than anyone that royal blood was no longer enough to ensure survival. The public's loyalty, once automatic, now needed to be earned with authenticity, service, and something far rarer, genuine human connection. And if the monarchy had any hope of enduring the storms ahead, it would not be by clinging to the past. It would be by placing faith in those who could lead with both heart and unshakable resolve. That was why he turned, without hesitation, to his most trusted confidant, his sister, Princess Anne. Not because she craved power or influence, but because she understood the true cost of duty better than anyone. He entrusted Anne with his deepest fears, his clearest hopes, and, ultimately, the wishes he knew he might never have the strength to declare himself. It was Anne who would bear the burden of revealing these truths when the time came. It was Anne who would ensure that his final hopes would not be buried with him. For Prince William, the emotional weight of these revelations became almost unbearable. Watching his father grow weaker by the day shattered the illusion that there would always be more time to prepare, more time to learn, more time to lean on the man who had spent a lifetime shaping him for this role. Now, as the reality of succession loomed larger and the monarchy's survival teetered between certainty and chaos, William felt the full gravity of the future pressing down on him. Yet even as he mourned the slow fading of his father's strength, another, even harsher truth was beginning to rise. A truth not about kings and crowns, but about Catherine. The woman now destined to carry a weight few could even comprehend. And as William wiped away his tears, another truth slowly emerged, a truth about Catherine's real battle. While the world watched Catherine Middleton with admiration, applauding her grace, her poise, her effortless embrace of royal life, few could imagine the battle she was waging behind the polished facade. They saw a future queen radiant, composed, unbreakable. But beneath the surface, Catherine was fighting a war no camera could capture. It was a battle waged in silence, a test of endurance not against rivals or scandals, but against the cruel, invisible forces that life can unleash without warning, even on those who seem untouchable. During King Charles's health crisis, Catherine became a pillar, not just for William, but for an entire royal family, desperate for something steady to hold on to. As Charles's strength visibly waned, and as William shouldered the crushing reality of looming responsibility, Catherine remained the one constant in a world that felt like it was tilting on its axis. She bore the silent fears, the sleepless nights, and the mounting pressure with a calm so unwavering that it seemed almost supernatural. And yet, even as she supported everyone around her, she was fighting a private storm of her own. When Catherine revealed her cancer diagnosis to the world, it shattered the illusion that even she was immune to life's harshest trials. In a simple, heartfelt message, she exposed her greatest vulnerability, not for sympathy, but for truth. She showed the world that bravery is not in pretending to be invincible. It is in standing tall while carrying fear in both hands. Her confession sent shockwaves through the nation, through the Commonwealth, through the very foundations of those who looked to her as a symbol of hope. And yet, in that raw moment of honesty, Catherine's legend grew stronger. She did not retreat. She did not falter. Even with the weight of her diagnosis pressing against her every step, Catherine continued her royal duties with the same elegance, the same dignity, the same relentless commitment to service that had defined her from the beginning. Every hospital visit, every charitable event, every quiet word of encouragement she offered became a testament to her unbreakable spirit. And as the public learned the depth of her struggle, something extraordinary happened. Love for Catherine surged beyond loyalty to the crown. It became something personal, something visceral. She was no longer simply admired. She was beloved. Across the country, messages of support poured in by the thousands. Strangers who had never met her wept openly for her. They did not mourn a princess brought low. They celebrated a woman whose courage had given them strength for their own battles. And through it all, Catherine kept walking forward, never dramatizing her pain, never seeking pity, but carrying the burden of her illness with a grace that defied explanation. But what the world did not yet realize was that Catherine's greatest test was still ahead. For while she fought her personal battles with remarkable resilience, forces beyond her control were gathering, threatening not just her peace, but the very future she had been entrusted to safeguard. But as Catherine carried the weight silently, a hidden plan for the monarchy's next chapter began to unfold. At Windsor, as the final echoes of Anne's words faded into the heavy silence, a truth even deeper and more staggering was laid bare. King Charles had not simply prepared William for the throne. He had crafted a final wish that would redefine the very core of the monarchy itself. It was not about bloodlines or traditions preserved in glass cases. It was about survival. It was about evolution. And it was about Catherine. Anne revealed, with a gravity that left no room for misunderstanding, that Charles's last and most heartfelt wish was for Catherine to become the living heart of the monarchy, the beacon who could bridge the ancient traditions of royalty with the desperate need for a modern human touch. In her, Charles had seen something no title could manufacture, no ceremony could bestow. He had seen the one person who understood the soul of service, who embodied the resilience, the empathy, and the quiet strength that would be demanded by a world growing colder toward old institutions. Where kings had once ruled by decree and fear, Charles knew that the next era of royalty would require something far more profound: trust. And in Catherine's every step, every carefully chosen word, every sacrifice made without complaint, he had seen the monarchy's best and perhaps only chance at earning that trust anew. As Anne laid bare the full scope of Charles's hope, the room already heavy with grief seemed to shift again. For a fleeting moment, the crushing weight of sorrow gave way to something else: hope. In Catherine's future rose the fragile but undeniable belief that the monarchy might not just survive the turbulent years ahead, it might flourish. And beyond the palace gates, though the world did not yet know the full extent of what was unfolding, The public's growing reverence for Catherine was already surging into something unstoppable. She was no longer seen merely as the wife of a future king. She had become, quietly but unmistakably, the symbol of a monarchy worth saving. William, his heart shattered by the slow loss of his father and the enormity of his coming role, made a silent, searing promise in that room, a promise to honor not just the title he would inherit, but the vision Charles had so carefully, so painfully entrusted to him, to stand by Catherine, to defend her, to walk beside her, not just as husband and partner, but as a leader ready to build a future their ancestors could scarcely have imagined. Yet even in that moment of hope, a shadow lingered in the corner of every mind present. Because while Catherine's destiny had been blessed, and her role consecrated by the dying wish of a beloved king, the road ahead would be merciless. The crown's survival would depend not only on admiration, but on Catherine's ability to withstand trials the world had not yet begun to unleash. Yet as the family accepted this future, one looming question still remained. Could Catherine truly carry the crown's weight alone? From the ashes of grief, a new strength began to rise. From the tears shed behind closed doors, a queen-in-waiting emerged not through ceremony, but through quiet resilience. Catherine and William stood at the edge of a new era, not just as heirs to tradition, but as architects of a monarchy reborn. In the shadow of King Charles's final wish, and in the lingering echo of Queen Elizabeth's secret vision, they made a silent vow not just to preserve the crown, but to transform it into something more powerful than it had ever been before. A monarchy not tethered to bloodline alone, but to service, love, and unwavering human connection. Their renewed commitment was not forged in the grandeur of state functions or the spectacle of public applause. It was born in private moments, in the understanding that the survival of the institution depended on authenticity, not entitlement. Together, Catherine and William envisioned a future where tradition and modernity would not stand at war, but would walk hand in hand. A monarchy that could look its critics in the eye not with pride, but with humility. A monarchy that could earn its place day after day, through real service and real sacrifice. Catherine, carrying the invisible scars of her private battles, pressed forward with even greater purpose. Her devotion to children's welfare, mental health awareness, and global humanitarian causes deepened, not as symbolic gestures, but as the foundation of the monarchy's new soul. Her advocacy wasn't staged for cameras or constructed for headlines. It came from a genuine belief that leadership meant lifting others first. She was not simply fulfilling royal duties. She was building a legacy rooted in compassion, a legacy that future generations could inherit with pride. And beside her, William found a strength he had not even realized he needed. In the whirlwind of change, it was Catherine's steady presence, her quiet wisdom, and her refusal to be broken that gave him the courage to face the unrelenting pressures of kingship. She was not merely a partner in title, she was the steady heart of a vision far bigger than either of them. Together, they understood that their reign, when it came, would not be about the preservation of an ancient crown. It would be about breathing life back into an institution, fighting to stay relevant in a rapidly changing world. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be storms fierce enough to shake even the most steadfast hearts. There would be moments of doubt, betrayal, and unimaginable pressure. But anchored by Catherine's resilience and William's quiet strength, the monarchy would stand not as a relic of the past, but as a living, breathing testament to the power of service over status. To a love story built not on fairy tale illusions, but on sacrifice, hardship, and a shared dream for something greater. The golden era that so many had feared would never come was now taking shape, not through thrones or titles, but through two hearts that refused to give up. Catherine and William, bound by love, duty, and an unshakable promise to the people, stepped forward into the future with hope burning in their wake. The king's last wish has been revealed, but the true story is only just beginning. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.